1980. Construction continues on the Tucuruí Dam, the first large-scale hydroelectric project in the Brazilian Amazon rainforest. It was a promised engine of development for the region and beyond. The Tucuruí Dam was about to power factories, schools, and hospitals, but lying in its path were the Paracanã Indians.
It was Thanksgiving 1980 when, for the first time in my life, I saw dead men walking. The Paracanã Indians, at one time, were this proud, thriving, indigenous people. They roasted a pig for us that Thanksgiving. It was really an act of kindness, but my recollection of the Paracanã is that they were bewildered and beaten more than they were kind. And the issue that I was dealing with was that, away from the Paracanã, people were talking about the hospitals that were going to get electricity from this dam, and the schools were going to get electricity. Factories were going to get electricity because of this dam, and so people were going to get employed. And so, on the one hand, all this progress was coming, and on the other hand, all this destruction was coming. So I kept wondering, was it worth it? And that's a question that has never left me for 30 years, whenever I think about the Amazon.
For almost a year, this fellow who sits on my right here and his partner traveled through the most remote, formidable jungle on Earth. They're heroes. There are a couple of them here. And together they wrote about their adventures in this book, which is called Amazon, so you can guess the jungle. Would you welcome Mark London? Mark? So this was goodbye to student life and youth before I go to work.
The last year of law school, and I was sitting there and I was saying, I can't do this for the rest of my life. I have to follow my boyhood dreams while I'm still a boy. So off I went.
Yeah.
I got on a plane. I went to the Amazon. On the first day there, I saw a kid get bitten by a snake. He went into convulsions and died. We went looking for crocodiles tonight. It was as great as I thought it was going to be.
Is the jungle mysterious and intriguing?
It's exotic. It's as rich with life as can possibly be.
With a piranha. Did you see any piranhas?
Oh, yeah. I caught them. We went out every day in the morning, caught some piranhas, grilled them up for breakfast, and we had breakfast.
It sounds like every pioneer story that we ever heard of. Yeah, of
It's the West. You have the gold rushes, you have the cowboys and Indians, you have the land wars, the poseros that we met, the squatter families with $500 bounties on their heads. You know, this is really happening down there. It's the Wild West. It's the frontier. It's an exciting and dangerous place.
All right.
That's Brian and me after not shaving for a couple of days.
Would you go back?
Well, I'm going back in another month.
Hi, Raquel. How are you? Nice to see you. Huh?
I need you. I'm not prepared to be such a braggart.
You seem a little tired. What's the matter?
No, just sleepy. I mean, 5:30 in the morning is not a time.
It was not my idea, okay?
I know it was not your idea, but it's just still 5:30.
And Virgilia will not be here until 8, right?
Yes, yes.
Bom dia. Right on time, huh?
Right on time.
Good seeing you. How you doing?
I'm fine.
Pós-Índia, né?
Pós-Índia.
Pós-Índia.
Look at you. You cut your hair and your beard for me. I mean, you're looking very young today. Huh?
Special day.
Right. And so therefore, saving,
The Amazon occupies the heart of South America, spanning more than 2.5 million square miles, larger than the size of the continental United States west of the Mississippi. It touches 9 South American countries, including Bolivia, Peru, Ecuador, Colombia, Venezuela, and of course, Brazil.
You know, the Amazon is this incredible sort of biological treasure chest, probably the single greatest repository of biological diversity on Earth. It is such an enormous biological system that it's really sort of a flywheel in regional climate in South America and even globally.
About 1 million of the world's estimated 5 million species of plants and animals live in the Amazon, with many of them living nowhere else. Scientists have cataloged 2,500 snake species, 2,000 fish, 1,500 birds, and 50,000 higher plants. And among all this are 21 million people living in the Amazon. That's 21 million people. This is their home, and they aren't going anywhere. The modern history of the Amazon begins with the inauguration of the capital city of Brasilia in 1960. Until then, the Amazon was largely a foreign, exotic country, even for Brazil itself, a forgotten appendage of the nation's everyday life. But with the inauguration of Brasilia, everything changed. The new capital city was built as the fulfillment of a vision to redirect the focus of the country's physical expansion inward. It symbolized Brazil's ambition and its capability. Brazil was about to embark on a conquest of making much of its own country accessible.
It started with the construction of the Belém-Brasilia Highway in 1960, which just opened the Amazon to waves of immigration. Prior to that time, all the population in the area had been river-based and had been isolated from the rest of the country. That was about to end.
Just around the time the road connections began, the Brazilian government was taken over by the military, which ran the country from 1964 to 1985.
And the military was focused on security. It was not focused on preservation. The Brazilian military wanted Brazilians on Brazilian land. It wanted a national presence in an area where 8 other countries were abutting this region. And so it was important for the military to populate the area with Brazilians as a bulwark against any invading force.
The idea for the Trans-Amazon Highway came forth in 1970. A 2,500-mile connection from the Atlantic region to the Peruvian border. It was promoted as a humane solution for the misery brought about by the drought in the Northeast, providing an outlet to a wet and supposedly fertile Amazon. And it opened a pathway for a march of Brazilians into empty space. Men with no land, to land with no men.
Well, roads are tremendously important because that brings all of these other things, like the cows and the soybeans in, as well as loggers and all sorts of other actors. You have landless farmers, you have big ranchers, you have what are called grileiros, these land thieves that come and illegally occupy huge areas and then sell them off or plant cattle pastures. And all of these follow roads, and huge areas are being opened up to deforestation this way.
The government subsidized ownership of large cattle ranches through fiscal incentives, such as allowing people to buy land in the Amazon instead of paying taxes, and rewarding people for clearing the rainforest for grazing areas. Most of the owners of these ranches were from the south of Brazil and were absentee owners, so they had no real connection to the land or its people.
These cattle ranches, they're called fazendas, they were enormously destructive environmentally, and they were unprofitable without exception. But the military was pleased with the results because what the world saw as statistics of deforestation, the military saw as statistics of integration. They had succeeded in putting Brazilians on Brazilian land. There was no thought of establishing civil society. There was no thought of creating opportunities for land ownership. There was really no thought of harmonizing human occupation with preservation. There was an importation of social conflict, rural poverty, not an ignorance, but just an apathy toward nature. And so the Amazon was hurt, and hurt very badly.
The development of the Amazon came at a time when the international environmental movement began to gain traction. The Amazon became one of its symbols because of the generally accepted, albeit misleading view that it was in a pristine, Eden-like state. Many countries, including the United States, had mucked up their own environments. Here was a forest still standing. So, the conventional wisdom outside of Brazil was that the Amazon should not be touched. Nothing good could come of it. This thinking had its roots in the work of Betty Meggers. In 1948, she and her husband Clifford Evans did fieldwork on Marajó Island, an enormous island the size of Switzerland right in the mouth of the Amazon River. They concluded that the scarcity of a settled culture on Marajó Island meant that the early Amazonians had a nomadic culture. The Amazonian environment, they argued, isn't conducive to anything but slash and burn agriculture. Burn the trees, plant in the nutrient-rich debris until it washes away, and then move on.
Well, then what happened is in the late 70s and 1980s, a number of archaeologists began to question this. A guy named Lathrop, and most importantly, Anna Roosevelt, and she re-excavated Marajó. She looked again at it, and she said, "What are you talking about?" Essentially, this place was great. They did fine. There's no sign of any ecological limits. They lasted for hundreds of years, which is most societies don't last that long. There's as many as 100,000 people here. Ecological limits had nothing to do with it. And furthermore, there are lots and lots of these kind of communities up and down the Amazon. What's happened in the last 20 years is that gradually more and more younger researchers have come to the conclusion that Roosevelt was essentially right. And so now you've got people going up and down the Amazon looking at sites and saying, no, they're much more larger and much more complex societies here. They just worked in a way that we didn't understand before.
Around the time that Brian and I made our big trips in 1980 and 81, things really began to change. Immigration of the Amazon have been haphazard and really failures. I think Belém Brasilia was a failure because it was all about cattle ranching. I think the Trans-Amazon Highway was a failure because there was no permanence along the road. But BR 364 along the southwestern perimeter of the Amazon changed things. BR 364 is the national highway. It was more mud than asphalt. It was a couple of thousand miles of mud. But along BR 364 came the farmers from the south of Brazil. And there was a different breed of emigrant. These are people who knew how to farm. And these are people whose lives had largely been okay. And therefore they had optimism, they had intelligence, they had a vision for the future. They had never faced these soils before. They had never faced this climate before. They certainly had never faced malaria before. And some of these places where they settled, the rates of malaria were 100%. But nothing stopped these folks. They had an optimism, an energy, a drive, that I have always associated with the entire country. They had packed their belongings and there was no going back. For there to be human occupation, something had to give way. In this case, it was the environment and it were the indigenous peoples who were there before. When people think of native Amazonians, those are the indigenous people who have occupied this place from time immemorial. But now virtually everyone who lives in the Amazon today has come from somewhere else. In August of 2006, Dennis and I made a trip along BR 319 from Manaus to Porto Velho. 18 hours of that road, we never saw anyone. We ended up 3 a.m. at Humaitá, which is a town along the Trans-Amazon Highway. We stayed at the Hotel Macedonia. The next morning, we see a guy in the lobby dressed as a professional, and I said to Dennis, I know him. And Dennis says, how do you know him? I said, I don't know him, but I know the type. And sure enough, this is what I had predicted to Dennis. His mom and dad had come from the state of Paraná in the late 1970s. They had gotten 200 hectares from the Land Colonization Agency, INCRA, and they had hacked their way into the forest. They built a house. They all got malaria multiple times. He had now 2 siblings who are teachers. He has a sibling who's a doctor. He's a hydrology engineer. They all have children.
Okay, so 200 hectares are gone forever, deforested. And what do you get in exchange? Well, you have a hydrological engineer who's making water better for an entire population, who's going to be healthier from now on. You have a doctor, one of his brothers. The doctor, of course, is going to make better living conditions locally. You have 2 teachers, so you're going to have more educated people. Additionally, you have their kids who are also going to be educated. And so you multiply the effect that these 200 hectares had on society, it's very significant. The question becomes, was it worth it?
When you're dealing with the Amazon, this is what it's all about, this balancing. Was it worth the destruction of 200 hectares of flora and fauna and all the biodiversity that's in those 200 hectares? Is it worth it when you get these productive lives at the other end? I guess another way of posing the question is, do you kill a tree to save a child?
The Amazon has long been littered with human ambition and abject failure. The booming rubber economy of the late 19th century afforded the excess that led to the construction of the Teatro Amazonas, the opera house in Manaus. The chandeliers came from France, marble from Italy, staircases and balconies from Scotland. It was completed in 1896 after 14 years of construction. Its declining state throughout most of the 20th century made it the best-known symbol of foolish development in the Amazon. A reinforcement of Betty Megger's warning that intrusion into the rainforest could last only so long. There was the Madeira-Mamoré Railroad. Its purpose was to move rubber tree production from landlocked Bolivia to the Amazon. It made sense when the world was rubber mad. Thousands of poor immigrants flooded the region in search of back-breaking work, but instead found malaria and yellow fever. In 1876, Henry Wickham stole rubber seeds from the Amazon and took them first to England and then Malaya, where they thrived. An act of biopiracy that single-handedly impoverished the Amazon by shifting the rubber monopoly from Brazil to Asia. Henry Ford came to the Amazon in 1927 to rekindle the rubber boom with Yankee ingenuity. He was given more than 2.5 million acres by the Brazilian government to make a plantation and build a quaint American town. But the Amazon was not an environment where trees could be produced on a Ford assembly line, and they were killed in short order by a fungus that spread from tree to tree and by uncontrollable soil erosion. In the 1960s, the American billionaire Daniel Ludwig convinced himself there would be a world shortage of wood by the end of the 20th century. His idea was to build a fast-growing tree farm to replace the natural forest to feed the future demand. So he bought up a tract of rainforest the size of Connecticut and Rhode Island combined. The pulp mill and power plant, each 17 stories tall, were shipped, fully assembled to Jari from Japan. A 3-month journey of more than 15,000 miles. But the relentless Amazon thwarted Ludwig at every turn. Ludwig dismantled his empire, selling off his worldwide collection of hotels, mines, plantations, oil and gas properties. But all that money couldn't rescue the Jari project from a lethal cocktail of disease, soil erosion, and politics. He finally sold his interests to a consortium of Brazilian enterprises in 1982 for less than a third of his investment, losing nearly $1 billion at Jari. By the early 1980s, the trend towards grandiose failure began to change dramatically. Stories reverberated throughout the country that no less than the mythical El Dorado had finally been discovered. It was called Serra Pelada, the Naked Mountain. Unlike the rest of the country where the government controlled most of the mineral resources, in Serra Pelada the people were allowed to touch the wealth and keep it.
There was almost like a pent-up moment that the lottery was accessible to everybody. Everybody from Brazil, all walks of life. I mean, I'd see the dreamers and the schemers and the adventurers and the destitute had come here because they had a chance.
Once there, they lived together in rough conditions, sleeping under tarps, working through the night, seldom bathing. In the first few months, the violence was horrific. Fights were fueled by an excess of alcohol, and broke out over plot ownership and the affections of scores of prostitutes who flocked to the area. Without sanitation, disease spread among so many in close quarters.
The place was in disorder, and it really was on the verge of total anarchy. And that's when Major Cordio showed up. In May 1980, Major Cordio, a mustachioed army officer with unshorn dark hair and a trim figure, walked to the center of the rugged dirt runway at Serrapalata, pulled out his gun, aimed it to the sky, and pulled the trigger. "While you can stay armed, don't forget that the gun that shoots the loudest is mine," he shouted to the throng. Within a month, thousands of guns had been laid at his feet. He issued a no women, no alcohol, no gambling edict, broke up large land holdings that some successful miners had assembled. He gave everyone already at the site a prospector's card and promised to bar any newcomers. Most significantly, he left the land in the hands of the miners. He and his staff of 150 soldiers, engineers, and geologists quickly demarcated ownership of individual plots of about 5 meters by 5 meters. No miner was allowed ownership of more than one plot. It was the first time a lot of these people had an opportunity to participate meaningfully. Serrapalata showed that if you give people a sense of ownership, a sense of belonging, a sense of entitlement, that this land that they till, that this land where they have settled belongs to them, then you have the beginning of the makings of a civil society. I think the Serrapalata brought into focus the promise that developed over the next generation in Brazil. And it was becoming more participatory and fairer and democratic.
But the march forward has not been without interruptions. A dedicated American nun, Dorothy Stang, was murdered in 2005 while fighting for land ownership rights for the people of the Amazon. She used to wear a t-shirt that said, "Violence against the forest is violence against the people." And on the back it said, "Violence against the people is violence against the forest."
I think that to tell people there's this huge chunk of the earth that you simply can't go to, especially people who have every right to go there, who are trying to make their lives better, just like anybody else anywhere in the world, and just to try to wall it off as futile. It's just not going to happen, and you're going to channel people into destructive activity. But you say, look, go here, but there's ways to make it work better than others. If you have any kind of sort of fundamental belief in the intelligence of people, in the idea of democracy, and all these things that at least I try to believe in, it gives you a chance of taking some of the people, people who are really broke and want nothing more than to have decent lives for themselves and their kids, and to have them work with the forest rather than against it. Whereas if you refuse to acknowledge the human presence, all they can do is work against it.
Land ownership forms the backbone of civil society, and until land ownership is straightened out, you will always have these conflicts in the Amazon. Those who died, and a lot of people died in this fight, Dorothy Stang and Chico Mendes, they fought for this. I mean, they fought to subside the violence against the people. And people who have toiled throughout their lives, people like the organizer Tarcisio Feitosa, or the journalist Lucio Flavio Pinto, or Marina Silva, who was the Minister of the Environment at one time. These people have fought the good fight, and there have been results for their efforts. But it's still a long way away. I mean, this is still a society in formation in the Amazon. I must say, though, that having been there for 30 years, it's a much better place today than it was 30 years ago. Back in 1980, about 3% of the Amazon had been deforested. Back then when we traveled, it was all just a sea of green, and you really thought it would just last forever.
The tipping point could be as close as at 20% deforestation, and we're roughly at 18%. So, it's close.
Every year, a chunk of land equivalent to an average-sized U.S. state disappears from the Amazon. The record year for deforestation was the year ending August 1995, when 18,056 square miles were deforested. Just think, driving from Washington, D.C. to New York in August of 1994, uninterrupted forest would have blanketed all of Maryland, Delaware, and New Jersey. If you made the same drive 1 year later, not a single tree would be left.
The biggest piece is always the Brazilian piece. It's also the piece that's the most vulnerable to Amazon dieback. Amazon dieback means that there just is not a sufficient amount of rainfall in the southern and eastern, southeastern parts of the Amazon to support a tropical rainforest. And what would happen then is it would turn into a savanna, basically a grassland with a few trees in it. And you would lose all the biodiversity that was in the rainforest that it's replaced.
Cattle ranching is the leading cause of deforestation in the Brazilian Amazon, accounting for 60 to 70% of hectares deforested each year.
A huge change in the last 25 years has been in cattle ranching. Cattle ranching, which was the occupation method of choice of the military government, was never ever profitable back then and hugely destructive. Now it's hugely destructive, but it happens to be profitable. A lot of this comes because of Embrapa, which is a quasi-public agency in Brazil, which has done phenomenal work on breeding techniques, pasture management, choices of pasture grass, the health of the cattle. I mean, Embrapa should win a Nobel Prize for a lot of the work it has done. And so if there's more room for cattle and more room for pasture, what does that mean? It means more deforestation.
For centuries, the soybean has been cultivated and used for food.
Along with cattle, soy has come to the Amazon. Brazil is now among the world's leading producers and exporters of soybeans. Remarkable, considering only 30 years ago its soybean production was virtually negligible. Over the past 20 years, about 1/3 of the Amazon's deforestation occurred in the state of Mato Grosso, the center of soy production. At the same time, however, the per capita income in Mato Grosso has risen more than 15-fold.
You go back to the old question, are you tearing down this forest and creating something that makes more sense through this act of deforestation? Maggi says yes.
Blairo Maggi, former governor of Mato Grosso, is the state's largest landholder, its richest businessman, and the patriarch of its farmers. His legacy is simple. He learned to grow soybeans in a place where no one thought it possible, and he figured out how to ship them out of an inaccessible location to the world's consumers.
What are we doing here? We are feeding the world. There is a hypocrisy in Europe and in the United States. They cry when we cut a tree, but they don't cry when children die or do not have an education. What have I done wrong? With my father, I have shown the world that this is the next breadbasket. I have made my family's life better. I have given jobs, good jobs, to many people. The towns of my state have schools, hospitals, and not so much malaria and disease.
You can't stop. In other words, there's so much economic activity going on. You just can't walk around and say to people, okay, here's an injunction, stop work. You can't do that. And so even if you change people's minds, and they have been changed, I mean, people are much more aware, conscious, sensitive, and green than they ever were. But, you know, these activities have a momentum. What's really important is that rainforest has to be preserved in a state that it can replenish itself, that you cannot go past that tipping point that Tom Lovejoy talks about of 20%, because if you do, you're going to lose all of these economic activities as this entire climate will change. We're there right now. I mean, we are really at that tipping point. Getting to Manaus was no picnic. It was 4 days, the Sobral Santos. We spent all day in hammocks and getting bored, playing a lot of gin. And then what would happen is, during the day or at night, we'd go to these small towns where people would get off, and everybody was so excited they'd go to that side of the boat, waiting to get off or waiting to see their friends, or for us, we were just bored, we wanted to see something. And the boat began to tip. 6 months after we were there, Sobral Santos capsized, and I think 168 people were killed. Fortunately, nothing happened to us on that trip except we died of boredom, that's all. And then, I couldn't wait to get to Manaus, and as soon as we got to Manaus, got off the boat, went right to Samuel Benchamel's office, which was right downtown near the docks. I'd never met him before, no. Those who really know about the Amazon have enormous respect for him. I just showed up at his office, I said, hi, I'm Mark London. Here's my friend Brian Kelly, and tell us about the Amazon.
My father was in love with the Amazon. He dedicated all his life to this region, both as a businessman, as a researcher, as a writer, as a professor. I would synthesize his ideas in 5 main topics. First, the idea that the Amazon is providing free environmental services to the world currently. An international environmental tax or carbon tax or whatever would be due to places like ours and others that clean up the environment or help clean up the environment or sustain it. The second topic would be that he was very concerned that man was being taken out of the equation when we were dealing with the problems in the Amazon. People were speaking so much about the environment and the air and the water and the land itself and the forest, and they were sort of ignoring people.
If you're going to help the Amazon, you have to help the people of the Amazon.
Yes, exactly. And as a consequence to that, we must be part of the planning process for our future. We have the right to plan and to influence the future. In fact, we have the obligation to do so. He thought it was our obligation to use the ingenuity and the innovation of man to bring out of the Amazon whatever it could. The fourth idea would be that we must recognize that the Amazon is so vast that we have actually several Amazons in here. Areas that are near the river have ecosystems completely different from mainland. Let's say we have areas that have lots of rain, that rain every day, several times a day, and others that don't. The soils are so different, and the vegetation is incredibly different. You know, fish are completely different from one area to another, and so on. So if you decide just to establish policies for the region that do not take that into account, you're bound to commit major mistakes. Lastly, he thought that you should use mainly 4 criteria. Project would have to be economically feasible, as all of them, and sometimes we even forget that here. You'd have to be ecologically adequate, and of course you'd have to go down and determine what that is exactly. You'd have to be politically balanced. That's one of the major hurdles that we find here, is that politically, both inside Brazil and outside of Brazil, sometimes we just can't accomplish what we want. And socially fair. So that is to take people, again, into the equation. These 4 visions, economic, environmental, political, and social, would have to be written down and sit down and thought about, and to use this as a framework for the development of the region. So basically, those are, I would say, if I were to synthesize all 42 of his books, right, in 5 ideas, these will probably be around these 5 themes.
Manaus, the metropolis of the jungle, capital of the state of Amazonas. The initial plan for modern Manaus was simple and straightforward, and had no agenda for the environment. With the arrival of the military dictatorship came central planning and increased concern about the isolation of Manaus. The Zona Franca was established in 1967 to make the city a comprehensive free trade zone, not just a duty-free shopping haven. For the past 30 years, Manaus received enough subsidies to attract domestic and foreign investment. Import duty exemptions and income and sales tax incentives have given rise to an industrial park of assembly plants. The city, in turn, has flourished.
The Zona Franca provides an answer to the very simple question, which is, how do you stop deforestation? And the very simple answer is give people jobs. Through jobs, they get everything else, which is the opportunity to settle in one place, to create capital, to invest, to have a future for their kids. And then they will lead productive lives, meaningful and productive lives, and they become shareholders in the society in which they live.
Well, I really believe that no one deforestates because it's smart or stupid. They deforestate because they need.
When he took office in 2003, Governor Eduardo Braga of the state of Amazonas knew that in addition to preserving the benefits of the Zona Franca, he had to devise a development program to address the needs of the rest of his state.
For sure, it wasn't easy. For sure, we took long term to start to get the results, but we believe it because a lot of speech, a lot of intention. But we did things here in the state. We make things happen to the people.
The consequences of deforestation reverberate far from the fallen forest. The urban poor is a phenomenon few expect to see when they envision the rainforest. Surprisingly, about 70% of the Amazon population is urban. Many comprise the first generations of immigrants who have difficulty adapting outside of the forest. They generally lack formal education and skills beyond manual labor.
And so Braga had the Prosamine plan, which in part tore down the shanties that had risen along the banks of the creeks and the streams in Manaus and replaced them with terrific modern housing. The deal is that you get to live in this housing if, your kids will go to school and your kids go have health care and that you maintain this area. And so there's been a very successful program.
One of the key drivers that we have in deforestation is poverty. The other is lack of education.
Well, education is essential in preserving the Amazon because only educated people can have the knowledge and lead productive lives with a conserved forest. So we realized that, and education became a cornerstone of the government's action in the state. We realized the poor condition that Amazonas was in. Amazonas was 26th out of 27 states in Brazil back in 2003. And with significant investment, we were able to move it to 13th in 2009, which is still not good enough, but it's a significant step in the direction where we need to go.
We learned with the free zone that if we work with no polluted industries and if we work with new technologies, we could finance the developing of our state without damaging the nature.
Braga firmly believes meaningful employment is the antidote to deforestation in the Amazon. To that end, he would expand the industrial base of Manaus and build a bridge over the Rio Negro.
Well, the bridge is controversial because, it symbolizes, the machine in the garden. It symbolizes the conquest of the Amazon. And people reflexively say this is the end of innocence.
This bridge is giving the possibility to the small cities surrounding Manaus, new perspective of new factors. At the same time, giving to the people who live by the forest condition to stay there, carrying the standing trees. The biggest answer that we must give to the people is how the standing trees are going to be valuable.
How they're worth more
standing than the deforestation.
Right. When the second book was done, I was ready to go back and be a lawyer full-time. And Amy Rosenthal, who's a researcher on the book, she came to me one day and she said, Mark, you're a real jerk. Okay, what did I do now, Amy? You're not going back to the Amazon anymore, is that it? And I said, yeah, I'm a lawyer. What I do day to day has nothing to do with the Amazon. She said, well, you have to go back. You spent, years of your life there. You owe them something. You've got to give back. Juma was born in my kitchen in Chevy Chase, Maryland. Virgilio Viana, who was the Secretary of Environment of the state of Amazonas, Dennis Minev and Eduardo Braga were in town, and my close friend Arnie Sorensen, who is the president of Marriott, was with us at the table. And when we were finished, and Virgilio claims that the cheesecake came out, and the cheesecake was the inspiration for all of this. If so, we should sell these things and we'll save the planet. Arnie turned to them and said, look, I've read Mark's book and I've spent, countless hours talking to Mark about the Amazon, and he's got all of these ideas, and, how can we help? Virgilio, who himself has many ideas of what to do, turned to the other two, and they clearly had been plotting. And he said, well, we have some ideas. There was talk back and forth that night, and then I ended up going down to Manaus in June of that year and put on a piece of paper what Juma became.
In 2006, the state of Amazonas created the legal framework for the Foundation for Amazon Sustainability, or FOSS, to exist separate and apart from the government, so that no matter who is in charge, certain policies would remain in place. FOSS set aside 600,000 hectares for the Rio Juma Reserve, an area about the size of Delaware where 3,000 people live.
So Virgilio, we start with dinner at my house, okay? And then it comes to a cheesecake, and then it becomes this, all right? What is this?
Well, this is part of utopia, if you wish.
Essa aqui, ó. Que lindas. Nossa, essa árvore aqui vai ficar... Você que tá criando, né?
É.
Lindas.
Mas só que eu fico me tremendo porque trepa lá por cima.
É, agora tem que aguentar, porque ele virou profissional. Agora ele é profissional de trepar em árvore.
Mas eu ainda não estou conformada muito bem, não.
Mas tem segurança, né? Tem segurança.
The Rio Juma Reserve is a revolutionary attempt to preserve the rainforest through the sale of environmental services. Those who live here have signed a contract, either with their signature, a thumbprint, or an X, whereby they agree not to deforest the land covered by this reserve and to tell the authorities if there is any deforestation taking place. In return, the foundation, along with Marriott International, would help them build sustainable lives in the Amazon.
These are all seedlings of mango trees, like this. So what we will do is to collect those seedlings and plant so that we have big orchards with lots of mango trees, lots of bananas. Thus, lots of fruit to eat and good health.
Gosta muito desse adubo aqui, desse fósforo, dessa comida aqui.
FOSS teaches Juma residents sustainable economies, such as rubber tapping, nut gathering, or fish farming.
Essa aqui é da escola Marriott.
3 schools have been built, with teachers in residence and internet connections so students can teleconference teachers beyond the reserve's boundaries. There are health posts, duly staffed, and a motorboat for medical emergencies. Mosquito nets cut down on malaria, solar panels provide electricity, and rainwater reservoirs improve the quality of life here. FOSS provides the framework for a civil society, for resolving disputes and allocating resources. Finally, they provide a monthly stipend that can be used outside the reserve and is only accessible to female heads of household to empower them.
E com
o dinheiro do Bolsa Floresta familiar, o que você faz?
A gente compra roupa, às vezes a comida, quando chega no Varipuanã, gasolina. Não tudo assim de uma vez que não dá, né? Já comprei esse tanquinho aí com dinheiro do Bolsa Floresta e o Bolsa Família, né? Engoli os dois e comprei um colchão para elas.
Desde que esse trabalho todo aqui começou, quais foram as coisas mais importantes para você?
Para mim foi a escola.
É? Por quê?
Porque meu filho esse ano a gente já ia levar ele para a cidade já para estudar. Aí já como tem a escola, ele já vai estudar aí.
Women in general think more frequently about the next generations. And this is sustainability. We have to think of what is going to happen to our kids, to our grandchildren.
At the bottom of all of this is a statement that we have figured out a way to create a mechanism that incentivizes people to preserve the forest, that it is economically more beneficial for them to preserve the forest than to deforest, and it works.
Let me show something to you here. This is just a normal ladder. This was something unique to the kids of this place because they had never seen a ladder.
When they put this in, remember, 6 hours, they kept
There was a line of kids.
For 6 hours.
And they stayed using this ladder until the evening, and there was a candle with them using this ladder. We're not simply talking about planting trees or recycling paper or saving forests. We're talking about people's happiness. And our biggest challenge is to link a happiness to standing forests. So we have to get people above the extreme poverty line. We have to make people happy. And this is a part of a human face to conservation.
The Rio Juma Reserve has become the platinum standard for carbon avoidance projects throughout the world. By the year 2050, the reserve will have prevented the release of more than 256 million tons of carbon into the atmosphere. And the lives of the people of Juma will have been immeasurably improved.
You can't say whether there's hope for the Amazon. You cannot talk about 21 million people in one sentence. You cannot talk about such a diverse area in one sentence. You have to look at individual people in individual places, and you have to decide whether their lives are better today than they were yesterday, and how to make their lives better tomorrow. Right here, this is ground zero. Here's the person, here's the family,
right.
Here's the life where it's going to begin to change.
From the nation's capital, you're listening to The Larry King Show. Once again, Network Radio's #1 interviewer, Larry King.
With Brian Kelly and Mark London, co-authors of Amazon, Brooklyn, New York. Hello.
Oh, hello. Are you talking to me?
Yep.
Oh, my goodness. Wait, I want to turn the radio. First of all, I hope you become a baseball commissioner. I'd vote.
I'd like to be the commissioner, yes.
Listen, I want to ask, so these people sound so interesting, you know. Where did I ever go? Brooklyn, that's it. Okay.
Listen, maybe Staten Island, maybe Tripoli. What's the question,
I
Dick?
wanted to ask you, the gentlemen, first of all, I think they're very brave. Are you kidding? First of all, where do they come from, actually? Like, what part of the United States?
I was born and raised in right near you, right in New York City, Manhattan Island.
And I grew up right across the river in Clifton, New Jersey.
Oh, my goodness, Alansma. Listen, what I want to say, I hope you sure made a documentary for TV or for the movies. I'd pay $5 to see it.